Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Welcome to Daily Dogman on Scary Stories NYC. I'm your old pal Bigfoot. Recently we got asked if we ever get Dogman stories from Connecticut. We did have a story months or a year ago about a dogman off a highway in Connecticut, but a few weeks ago someone sent in this tale we're going to present today. I'm not sure when it's supposed to have taken place, but I get the impression it was decades ago. There are no specific references to things like cell phones, which leads me to think it would have been set in the 1980s or earlier. I contacted the person who sent me the rough version of the story, but they never got back to me, so I just went with it. The area it's set in looks very lovely during the day, as you'll see from the photos and Google Maps images I'll include, but it must have been terrifying to be there in the growing darkness while being pursued by something as large and unpredictably savage as the monster described in this story. If it's true, of course. Like I said, the submitter never responded to my email questions. Maybe they just made the story up, or maybe the Dogman got even with them for telling us its secrets. I doubt we'll ever know, so let's just get started with this creepy tale, which we are calling the Connecticut River Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, as a kid, I heard that my Uncle Kent saw a real-life werewolf on the island in the middle of the Connecticut River when he was driving down Hockanum Road. This was the version of the story that my grandmother told. I kept bugging my parents to take me to see this Werewolf Island, as I had come to call it. My brain was lit up with the idea that the Wolfman might be a real thing. My parents kept telling me that my grandmother just liked to tell stories, and that this was something old people did a lot. I didn't care. There was a chance that werewolves were real, and there was a chance I could see one, and it was only about a 35-minute drive from where we lived, so I wanted to go see for myself. It literally took me years to convince them, but when I was 8 or 9, we were going to visit relatives, and it would only take us a little out of our way if we went down Hockanum Road. My mother talked my father into doing it, quote, just to shut him up once and for all, unquote. Little did they know that would only be the start of my interest in such things. So, on that fateful day, we drove down Hockanum Road, and I was so excited I was ready to explode. It was a bright, sunny summer day, and the first thing we noticed as we got near to the island was that as we passed it, there was no way to see it. At least not from Hockanum Road. Why? There were too many trees in between on the shoreline near the road, and they pretty well blocked the view of the island completely. Now will you stop bugging us about werewolves? Asked my father impatiently, but I didn't answer. I was disappointed, that's for certain, and I felt about 89% less sure that a werewolf might be a real thing, but I felt strongly that it was better to cling to that 11% positive feeling than to give in to my father's bleak and unimaginative worldview. No point in being a grown-up before you absolutely have to. That was how I felt about things back then, and that's probably how I still feel. Grandma came over to the house on Mother's Day, and I told her all about our trip down Hockanum and how the trees blocked our view. Grandma said we got the story wrong. According to her, Uncle Kent had seen the wolfman in the dead of winter when the trees were bare. I was still skeptical, but she had rekindled hope that the story might have some validity to it. Boy, was my dad mad at her for doing that. They grumbled at each other for the rest of the day, but I didn't care because my head was dancing with visions of DOGMAN living in Connecticut. Then, the next Christmas, Uncle Kent himself came to stay with us for the holiday. This was an event I excitedly waited weeks for. I might have been almost as excited about getting to talk to him in person as I was about Christmas itself. When we finally got to talk, he said the DOGMAN he saw was not on the island. It was walking out of the trees next to Hockanum Road. Grandma angrily insisted that he had told her he saw it on the island, and an argument ensued. Uncle Kent waited until Grandma was done bellowing. Then he told her that the werewolf, as he called it, was coming from the direction of the island, and it was drenched, soaked in water, dripping. He thought it might have just swam from the island, which he thought was how my grandmother got confused about how the story went. Grandma still insisted he was telling the story wrong, but this new version made more sense to me, and my parents began to realize that I was never, ever going to tire of this subject. I was more interested in whether DOGMAN was real than if Santa was real. Actually, none of us called him DOGMAN. It was either the Wolfman or a werewolf in our terminology in those days. Although I do call him a DOGMAN now, the first time I heard that term was, I think, in reference to the Michigan DOGMAN, which in the stories I heard back then stayed down on all fours. This thing that Uncle Kent claimed to see walked like a werewolf on its hind legs. I stayed fascinated by the subject for years. Both bipedal and quadrupedal werewolves and DOGMAN were fascinating to me. But eventually, I grew more interested in girls and less interested in monsters. Well, for a few years at least. One summer, I was home from college and I was hanging out with some friends. We decided to go down toward the Oxbow, which used to be a looping side part of the Connecticut River, but now was cut off by the highway over there, so it was a C-shaped body of water, shaped like the letter C. People keep their boats at a marina there these days, and it's a nice place to be on a warm day. But we were young, and we soon got bored, and we started wandering over toward the wildlife sanctuary to the west. DOGMAN was the furthest thing from our minds. In fact, I remember hanging out by a pond there and talking about the Connecticut River monster. I think that was supposed to be a giant eel. It had been seen back in the late 1800s in the Connecticut River itself, but one of our friends reminded us that the Oxbow, and possibly that pond too, had once been part of the Connecticut River, and so maybe the monster lived in the nature reserve now instead of out in the wild. It started getting later in the day, and we really should have started back toward the car, which was a good 40-minute walk from where we were. But being young and feeling free, we wandered a bit into the woods instead. I knew we were heading even further from the car by doing this, but I had no schedule or any place to be, and I had planned on sleeping late the next morning anyway. I didn't know when I would see these friends again, and they didn't know when they would see me, so we all walked further and further into nowhere. We had the feeling of strength in numbers coupled with our youth, and we felt immortal and unbeatable. So onward and onward we went into the unknown. Eventually, we came upon a log and sat down on it, then began telling each other ghost stories. Or, well, at least one of us started doing it, because within minutes we heard a crashing sound, and out of the trees ran this immense, dog-like creature. It was bipedal, and it ran like a dinosaur or an ostrich on its hind legs, but it had front paws it held up, and a very large, dog-like head. The head seemed too large for its body, but the legs were so massively strong, they looked as though they could support nearly any weight. I mean, these legs were like tree trunks. So, it ran out of the trees, and it seemed to be looking for something. We all shut up and just stared at the thing, which suddenly noticed us, and everything went all quiet. It was pretty dark in there, but it was only dusk, so we could still see the creature pretty well. It bent over forward in our direction and seemed to be smelling to get more information about us. We held perfectly still and just hoped it would get bored and move on. No such luck. The thing charged toward us, and we ran back over the log we had been sitting on and into the woods beyond. We were well off any path and in pure wilderness. The dog barked in a way that was at once both playful and deeply savage. It felt more like it wanted to play with us than eat us, but it had to be over 8 feet tall and as strong as 5 men, so I wasn't sure we would survive much playtime with Fido. I heard a scream, and to my right, I saw one of my friends grabbed by the back of his collar by the monster DOGMAN. It didn't grab him with its hand or paw. It grabbed him with its fang-filled mouth. I never noted whether it had fingers on its paws. Maybe they were like other normal dog paws, and maybe the only way it could have grabbed him was with its teeth. But either way, that's how he did it. He dragged my friend back, and I expected the worst to happen. I stopped running and just stood there, watching. The dog pulled my friend back along the ground until he was underneath the huge monster. Then he did the most surprising thing I'd ever seen. He flung my friend forward through the air. He basically threw him by his collar, and he must have been 15 feet or more off the ground as he went crashing into the trunk of a tree, careening off one side of it, then slamming to the ground. Hard. I ran over, terrified at what I might find, but when I reached my friend, he had already regained his footing and was shouting at me to run. Run! And so I did. After that, we ran until I felt I could run no further, and then we ran some more. I never knew I had such reserves of strength inside me because I never had to find out before. We could hear the DOGMAN behind us, and we knew we couldn't stop. Then we stopped. Why? Not by choice, I'll tell you that much. We stopped and looked up, and up, and up at what was blocking our path. It was the mother of all dogmen, a huge female that made the male running up behind us seemed like a toddler by comparison. This was too large to be possible. I felt completely insane just being on the same planet as what I was looking at. We were all so exhausted that we just laid down and waited for the worst to happen. It wasn't like we had any place else to go or any more energy to take us there. We had a giant dogman chasing us from behind, and a much larger one blocking our way to the front. I imagined there were more on either side of us, and I began to cry, thinking of all the people back at school I would never see again, and my parents, and my dog, and so on. I began regretting all the things I wished I had done, the people I would never get to say goodbye to, the girls I had never gotten the nerve to ask out. I think it was sort of like my life flashing in front of my eyes, as they say in books. I was preparing myself for whatever comes after life, and I was accepting my fate. The giant female dog in front of us began walking in our direction, and I could hear my other friends crying as loudly as I was. One step toward us, and the ground shook. Another step in our direction, and I could feel the earth tremble underneath me. One more step, and the monster was directly between me and a friend of mine. Then, surprising all of us, it took another step, and another, and soon it was well past us. Sitting up, confused, I looked behind us and saw the mother dogman grabbing the merely immense male dogman by the scruff of his neck like a mother cat grabbing a kitten. They walked off a few feet with him in her mouth. She tossed him to the ground, and he assumed a submissive posture. This was her son. It had to be. If that's the case, I realized, I didn't want to wait around to meet Daddy. I took off, and my friends followed. We didn't know where we were running, but we ran. As long as it was away from those dog things, then it seemed like it must be the right direction. We eventually came out in a large field behind someone's backyard. Stumbling and walking in exhaustion, we were met by the people who live there. They gave us a lemonade and brought us inside their house to catch our breath. They listened to our story wild-eyed, unsure of whether to believe us or not. They had never heard of such a thing, especially not in their own backyard, almost literally. They didn't seem to think we were lying. They probably thought we were on something, if you know what I mean. But they were kind people, and after we had recovered a bit, they drove us back to where we had parked our car, and our Dogman adventure was officially over. Now, we were not on anything that day, and I know we didn't imagine or hallucinate those two huge animals. On the other hand, such things simply could not possibly exist. Not in that forest, not in Connecticut, not in the United States, not on this planet, at least not so close to civilization, not without us ever noticing them before. So, we each came up with our own theory as to what had actually happened. One of us thought maybe the Dogman were from underground, and that they only came up to the surface on rare occasions, or only at dusk to hunt. Another of us, a psych major, thought we had witnessed Jungian archetypes of some sort. Another had a variation on that theory, saying that they must have been racial memories of a creature that probably lived in the ancient past in that very forest. Just like how an embryo develops gills before it develops lungs, maybe our minds or our DNA are programmed to remember species from the Earth's past that no longer actually live here. I don't share any of those theories, though. I just admit, I have no idea what we saw and what chased us. I don't know where they came from, and I don't know where they went to. All I do know is that they could have destroyed us, and yet they didn't. I have never, in all my days, ever gone back to that nature preserve, and I have never returned to the Oxbow area. In fact, I don't even like to drive anywhere near the Connecticut River at all. It's because of the intense fear I felt on that evening when I and my friends were chased and almost scared to oblivion by the Connecticut River Dogman. We'll be back tomorrow with another all-new story about Dogman called Dogman Attacked My Bigfoot Nest. If you don't know what a Bigfoot nest is, just watch this next little cartoon, and we hope we'll see you guys again tomorrow.
Hey, Biggity Foot. What are you doing for July 4th, yo?
I don't know, Debbie, but I do know what I'm doing the weekend after.
OMG! What's that, yo?
I'm gonna go to the Collectibles Extravaganza up in Boxborough, Massachusetts, right next to Wolf Swamp, where Henry Lee Dogman lives.
Badass, yo!
I know, right?
Are you gonna, sell your stuff?
I'm gonna buy other people's old stuff and turn it into my new stuff.
Good, cause your nest could sure use some, redecorating, yo.
Come to the Collectibles Extravaganza, hosted by the king of pop culture himself, TV's famous Gary Summers, who appeared as an expert on pop culture on the PBS Antiques Roadshow. It's the weekend of July 6th and 7th, 2019, at the air-conditioned Regency Hotel, where Route 111 meets Route 495 in Boxborough, Massachusetts, home of the Wolf People. See you there. And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
If you enjoyed this, please click like or consider subscribing. Remember to click the bell icon or you won't get notifications. If you want to listen to Bigfoot's secret uncensored story each Sunday, just go to peterbernard.com and become a paid subscriber. See you tomorrow. Same dog time, same dog channel.
Come back for more scary stories.